Hi everyone, Rose Wildsmith here. What have you been avoiding? What do you flat out say, I can't do that? Today I'm going to talk about something that's very close to my heart, fear. For some reason, making art is very scary for a lot of people. It can be sneaky. You might not realise that you're afraid, you might just feel inhibited around certain activities or materials. For me, I know that my fear is around drawing and representational painting. Painting faces? I have 3 things that all begin with C that can help you overcome your fears. Contextualisation can really help to put your fear in context. In the most basic sense, just reminding yourself that this is art, not brain surgery, can help. The stakes are in general pretty low. Confidence. It really helps to believe in your own abilities. Of course, this can come from external validation, but it's best to build your confidence on a scaffolding of skills. You build your skills by learning and practicing a lot. If you're not confident about your abilities, then remind yourself that you're constantly improving. Every time you make art, you're practicing your skills. Every failure is taking you further down the road to success. Courage. To have courage means doing the scary thing in spite of the fear. Sometimes you have to really push yourself to do the thing that scares you. Think of it as exposure therapy. The more you do the scary thing, the less scary it becomes. I'm personally taking note here that I should draw a lot more faces. So those are the 3 C's of overcoming fear. Let's dig in now to some specific fears around making art. Wasting materials. This is something I feel deeply, the fear of wasting materials. In particular, paint. Paint can be really expensive, especially if you buy really good quality paint. Part of the fear is around wasting the money that you've spent. And of course, there are the environmental considerations. You don't want to throw away good paint because that's not good for the environment. What this fear can look like: avoiding using your best paints, squeezing out tiny drops at a time, feeling like you need to use the paint that you have left over on your palette in your painting, even if it's not what the painting actually needs, feeling guilty about having paint left over that you haven't used. How to contextualise this fear? Paint is made to be used. You're in charge, the paint is just a tool. If you don't use paint because you're afraid of wasting it, guess what? It dries up and degrades in the tube. Isn't that more wasteful than using it? Even pouring out paint on the palette and throwing it away at the end of the day is better than it staying in the tube, because you've used it in the process of making art and improving your skills. That means it has contributed to the furthering of art as a whole, which is what paint is born to do. Let your paint fulfill its purpose in life. Here are some practical tips. If you have leftover paint that you don't want to waste, you can use it in your sketchbook as a starting layer. You can also use up leftover paint on a canvas or a board. Even if it gets covered over, it will still contribute to the finished painting in the end. Better than going in the bin, right? If you're worried about the cost of paint, just use cheaper paint. It's honestly better to use a lower quality paint than to feel inhibited. You can find really inexpensive paints at the hardware store. You can also dilute your paints with a paint medium without reducing the quality. I like to add some open mediums to my paints, which slows down the drying time a bit. Ruining paintbrushes. This fear is especially relevant if you use acrylic paint, because if you accidentally let the acrylic paint dry on the paintbrush, it won't come off. So what do we do instead? We stick the paintbrush into a jar of water. This is fine for a short time, but if you leave it in there, bristles can end up splaying out, the wood can start to rot, and the coating of the paintbrush starts to flake off. What this fear can look like: you avoid using your nice brushes, you spend a huge amount of time washing your brushes out, you start to feel really guilty if your paintbrush starts to degrade. How to contextualise this fear? Paintbrushes are, like paints, a consumable material. They won't stay nice and perfect forever. If you're using your paintbrushes so much that they get totally wrecked, that's actually a really good sign. You're making lots of art and you're getting a lot of use out of your brushes. Some of the most interesting marks come from those paintbrushes that have started to splay and frizz. There are things that you can do to make your paintbrushes last longer, but most of all, just don't worry too much. Use your paintbrushes until they fall apart. That's what they were born to do. Help your paintbrushes live out their life purpose. Some practical tips. You can wash dried on paint off with something like this product, and I'll have the link to this in the description. but most of them won't mind being in your water until the end of your painting session. The water damage mostly comes from leaving them soaking in water for a long period of time between painting sessions. The brushes can get deformed if you leave them resting on their bristles in the bottom of the jar. So you could try using one of these brush jig things, or you could simply rinse out your brush in the water straight away and then take it out of the water. Then do a thorough clean at the end of your painting session. Use soap and make sure you get right down into the ferrules to make sure you get all of the paint out, because that's where, if the paint starts to gather, it will start to make the bristles splay out. Collect your ruined paintbrushes and stick them together to make really interesting mark making tools. Ruining a good sketchbook. This fear comes in two parts. First of all, the fear of starting your new sketchbook, which is so perfectly pristine that you daren't sully it with your lowly marks. And secondly, once you've done a few pages in your sketchbook and you start to actually like the things that you've done in there, there's the fear that you might make a bad drawing and ruin your entire sketchbook. What this fear can look like. You hoard nice sketchbooks without ever starting to use them. You have a pile of sketchbooks that you've started and maybe done a few pages, but then you've abandoned them. You don't ever start a sketchbook. You do art on random bits of paper that get lost. How to contextualise this fear? I actually have a whole online course about overcoming sketchbook fears, and I'll put the link to that in the description. But essentially, like with the other fears, sketchbooks are there to be used. It's better to make terrible art in your sketchbook than to avoid using your sketchbook at all. Scribble, rip the pages, spill your coffee on it. All art, including the disasters, in fact, especially the disasters, contributes to the development of your skills. The great thing about sketchbooks is that you can always turn the page or close the book and nobody else ever has to see. It's actually one of the safest venues to make art, explore, step out of your comfort zone and try new things. Some practical tips. You don't need to work in your sketchbook chronologically. If the first page terrifies you, open it up somewhere in the middle and start there. You can always cover things up if you don't like them. You don't even need to finish one page all in one go. You can come back to pages much later and add to them. Then it feels like your sketchbook is a constantly evolving thing that grows with you, which I think is really nice. For more tips about sketchbook fears, you can check out my online course, and I'll put a link down in the description. Ruining a painting. So you've got over the fear of the blank canvas, you've plunged into the painting process. So far, so good. Oh no, you actually quite like what you've done. You're worried that if you carry on painting, you're going to ruin everything that you've done so far. What this fear can look like. You feel inhibited once you get into the middle stages of the painting. You lose the state of flow. You make a lot of small picky marks. You try to preserve a particular part of the painting, but it stops the painting from hanging together as a whole. You abandon unfinished paintings because you're scared to push them forward. How to contextualise this fear? The fear of ruining a painting is based in a lack of confidence. You feel like what you've made is a happy accident and you're scared that you're never going to be able to recreate it. Believe in yourself. You made something that you love once, you can make it again. You have to weigh up the balance of risk. On the one hand, you have the risk that you'll lose something that you like. The bigger risk here is that you hold yourself back and you don't allow your painting to progress. That means you're also at risk of not progressing as an artist. See this as a practice of letting go. Letting go of things that you like allows things that you love to come through. Some practical tips. If you made something that you really like and you're scared of losing it, take a photo of it or scan it. That way you have a record of the thing that you like. You can also use this as a way of auditioning different options for your next step. You could do this digitally with a photo editing app where you can draw over your painting in different colours to test out different things that you might try next in the painting. You could also, of course, do it the old school way and print out a copy of your painting and then try painting over it in different ways, wasting time. You start worrying that you're wasting time on the task you're doing. Is this really productive enough? If I don't make something worthwhile at the end of this, I will have wasted a whole load of time that I could have been spending doing something much more productive and worthwhile. Isn't it really self-indulgent to spend time making art when there's more important things to be doing? What this fear can look like. You worry about spending time practicing. I don't have time to play and experiment with my materials. I need to be working on a masterpiece. You measure your success solely based on the monetary value of your work. How to contextualise this fear? Far from being a waste of time, making art or doing anything creative is extremely good for you. It's an essential part of every civilization on Earth. If you feel called to make art as a career or as a hobby, you need to spend time doing the work. There are all sorts of supportive activities around making art that all contribute towards the creation of the pieces that you feel are finished works. This includes visiting museums, reading about art, watching documentaries about art, talking about art, visiting other artists' studios, taking courses and workshops, teaching yourself new skills, and most of all, practicing with the materials and experimenting. Like a musician practices their scales, visual artists need to swatch their materials, learn about the way different colours mix, explore different approaches to creating art, do warm-up drawings or paintings that are total rubbish, and make tons and tons of bad art to learn about their craft. None of this is a waste of time. It all feeds and nourishes the development of the art and the artist. Not being good enough. Finally, the mother of all artist fears, not being good enough. Everyone has an opinion about art and whether or not it is good. There's this idea that artists pop out of the womb with a fully formed artistic ability, and if you aren't one of those chosen few, you just simply don't make the cut. It can feel shameful to put yourself out there as an artist. If people are going to snigger, where on earth did they get the idea that they're good enough to be an artist? How embarrassing. What this fear can look like: hiding your artwork, feeling ashamed if anyone sees your artwork, rejecting compliments about your work, insisting that you are not an artist, not entering your work into competitions or group shows because you feel like it's not good enough, taking an endless stream of courses and workshops, and deferring to others rather than yourself about how to make art. How to contextualise this fear? Every artist that has ever existed has made art that isn't very good. In order to become a master, they've put in hours and hours of work to learn their skills. And guess what? That definitely involved making some crappy work. Of course, the crappy work probably went on the fire or was painted over, so that's not the work that you see hanging in galleries and museums. Look at this painting by Van Gogh. The proportions of the head are completely wrong. It's a common mistake made by beginner artists to chop off the top of the skull. And even Van Gogh made that mistake early in his painting career. Another way of looking at this is that making art is very brave. You open yourself up to criticism from everyone because absolutely everyone has an opinion about art. That's okay. Everyone has different tastes. Jackson Pollock's work fetches millions. But there are plenty of people out there who think his work is absolute rubbish. On the other hand, there are people out there who make extremely accurate, photorealistic pieces that are technically astounding. But if that style isn't your cup of tea, then you're just not going to like it. You're never going to go from zero to painting the Sistine Chapel. So honour the part of the journey that you're on right now. Focusing on other people's opinions rather than your own development does a disservice to everyone. Allowing other people to see your imperfect art gives them permission to try imperfectly too. Go out and shine your light. So I hope you found something useful in this video, and I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Let me know what your biggest fears are around making art, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. Okay, bye.